Hello and greetings. Welcome to nobody right now, obviously. But if you're watching this later on YouTube, please spread this around. This is the first in a sort of constitutional class that is just my neurotic project that I have to do because not enough people know what the Constitution says and how it works. And it's needed to be revised for quite a long time. So what I'm hoping to do here with this series, and this is episode 1 of the series, is get as many people involved as we can for English speakers and people who live here so that we can reword things appropriately, really eliminate the 18th century language and update it so that the average American reading level can understand what our rights are, and that way you will be, I don't know, maybe more properly horrified about everything that's going on. But let's get right into the class, because I have no idea how long it's going to take to go through this. So let me show you what I've got set up. Boom, right here. All right. So I've got a nice little Word document with our Constitution in it. I also have a physical copy here just because this is really, when you look at it, an alarmingly small document, and that's part of the problem. But we also have a 1828 English Language Dictionary here, Johnson and Walker's English Language Dictionary, so we can't have any sort of confusion, because the goal here is not to change any of the meaning initially. We have to simply get rid of the archaic kind of language and the cadence that they used to write it so that it is more common and normal. And then later on, if everyone's interested, we can start to actually, speculate on the kinds of things that need to be changed in it so that it is updated and more modern. But all we're doing first is going all the way through it, front to back, and rewording it so that the meaning is the same and, legally the same for what we want. And using this dictionary here, that way people won't be able to say, oh, well, maybe this word, how do you know that it was 250-ish years ago, maybe that word was kind of used differently then. Nah, I got you right here. This is one of the first English language, complete kind of dictionaries, and it's certainly of that era. So in case there's any question, or if we're going to reword, and I've already started some, then we can simply go through it and look up the word here together and go, well, what do they mean by liberty exactly? Because jumping right into the Word doc here, excuse me, we can see that there's already pretty, I don't want to call it flowery language, but, it's not exactly the kind of legal language we would use today. Although, on that subject, that's another reason why this has to happen, because the legalese and the sort of very litigious society that we've become, where, the answer to everything is get the lawyers involved and start the lawsuits, is part of the oppression for our democratic collective. We can't do anything ourselves because most people can't read that language and understand it. So you have to have a lawyer to do pretty much anything. And that's inappropriate when it comes to how our government functions and how the laws are written. The laws need to be written in a way that everybody can understand it. And right now, we're looking at roughly an average of a 6th grade reading level for the American people. So there's a lot of work to be done, and if that statistic was unknown to you, I'm sorry, but that's about where it stands. And that's what happens when the government intentionally sabotages its own education system for around 80 years in order to make sure the American people don't understand their own rights or understand the law. So that's why I'm here. We're undoing all that, and I want to undo it together by going just one by one, word by word through here. Like I said, I have no idea how long that's going to take. It's going to take as long as it takes. So every week here, please spread the word if you're watching the VOD here on YouTube again, 5 to 7 Eastern time on Tuesdays. I want a lot of people in chat so that we can do, things like polls if necessary. If we come across a disagreement and we can't exactly agree what this phrase is supposed to mean in a, not 250-year-old English dialect, we've got to get enough people in there that we can kind of make it statistically meaningful when we agree on what to rephrase it as. So you'll see that I put up here, I kind of had some notes here for explanation in blue, the rewording we're going to write down here in red, and then later on the next pass through, we can potentially, do some additions that were, things that aren't actually laws versus what we kind of thought were laws, and they're only norms and traditions. That's the real point here, to understand exactly what the laws are supposed to be here versus what other people are telling you they are. We need to start doing the work ourselves a great deal more, and that's another reason why all the legalese is a problem. That's a barrier for our democracy to be able to interact with our government on a level that's appropriate. So, let's jump in to the United States Constitution. Here we have the preamble, which more and more people are talking about now, which is good, because I don't think it gets enough attention, because this is the purpose of the document, as you can see in my notes here. Establishes the purpose of the document. All things within then must follow these causes to be valid. I think that's a pretty fair statement. So let's read it. We're going to read through first, and then we're going to go and cut it up little by little. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. See what I mean by flowery right away? Like, blessings of liberty is not a legal phrase that is going to be easily interpreted, unless, of course, we've got our dictionary right here, which I've already looked up some of this for. So like I said, I'm trying to pre-game a little bit of these so that I'm ahead of the lesson plan, like a teacher actually would. Didn't want to be a teacher. Ending up having to do this anyway, the hard way, but that's fine. So, we the people of the United States. That seems pretty solid. We don't need to really reword that part. I don't think that should be okay. Let's make sure our stuff is the right wording here. I am going to add commas because I am pedantic, and in case you didn't clock that already, that's definitely why I'm doing this. I'm convinced that no incredibly pedantic individual, and certainly no one on the spectrum, has been able to read through this Constitution without going insane. It is an absolute mess of a document, and that's why we have to get our hands dirty and do it ourselves. So we, comma, the people, people of, and I said these United States, because I think that's more correct English these days. Now, they've capitalized a lot of words, particularly in this document, to mean, to have emphasis or as ones that may be proper nouns. These, I think, fall under the necessity of emphasis, because they're listing these different things with commas here: order, union, justice, tranquility, welfare. These are the hits. These are the points of this Constitution. So I've got my notes here. Let's see. So in order to form a more perfect union, again, that's not a very easily parsed phrase for legal purposes, you know? What's that mean? To form a more perfect union. So, having looked up answers already, I think we need to go for in order, not capitalized necessarily, to create a better nation, because we do have to remember how the nation started and the revolution and rebellion that basically most of these high on their own supply farmers told the king to go themselves and said, we'll do a nation ourselves. So, you know, the goal here was to make a better nation than the one they were a part of previously. Comma, again, commas between all these things, since these are points. To form a more perfect union in order to create a better nation, to establish justice needs to become establish legality. You know, this is the legal document of the country. It's, you know, everything has to fall under the purview of this document at the end. That's why we have courts that determine constitutionality of laws, and if they're determined not to be, then they get thrown out. You know, everything has to fall under this heading. This, and everybody, especially all the excessively religious individuals in the country, this is the premier document of this nation, nothing else. This one right here is the highest law of the land. Not what you believe, not what you want, nothing else. Sorry. Everything else comes second to this document. If you can't understand that, or if you're not on board, I'm going to call you a bad American, because that's how this works. So, to establish legality sounds a lot better than just justice. And now we'll come to our very first misspelling. Even in the 1828 dictionary here, they do have an entry for the word insure with an I, but it is to see the word, it's just a reference to go to the word ensure with an E. It's like, see ensure, please. Don't spell it incorrectly. So right off the bat, the people who, you know, drafted this document misspelled one of the in the first paragraph, you know, and that was even at the time, right? Like this is the dictionary from that time frame. So instead, they will ensure. Let's see, domestic tranquility. Now, domestic is still very good. We can understand that, but tranquility, I think in this case, via that dictionary, means peace. So to ensure domestic peace, not a lot to change here for provide for the common defense. That one's easy to understand. Similarly, for promote the general welfare, we all understand those words. None of those are foreign or too old for our current language. You know, there's not a lot that we have to redo, but depending on, you know, making it more legible, more readable for people, we may end up with a slightly longer document at times in order to use simple words, but use more of them instead of, you know, trying to be as compact and as litigious as possible when they were writing it the first time here. Approach general welfare, and let's see, and secure, this is the one, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Now this is very intentionally fancy writing, you know, that's how they wanted it to sound. But we don't need to be fancy, we need to be clear, okay? So, we need to say instead, and secure is still fine, and secure the promise of freedom to ourselves and our descendants. That's posterity. Posterity is descendants. Do establish, because ordain and establish mean the same thing. There's immediately, the English teachers out there, I'm sure, are, the history teachers love this as a document, but the English teachers must hate it. Establish this Constitution for the United States of America. There. So, I'm also kind of a save scummer when it comes to video games and things, so I'm immediately just going to keep hitting that save button up here as we edit and go through. So, I feel like that's a pretty solid start. Again, this being the preamble, this being the Constitution and the point of it, everything else, even within this document, has to fall under these sort of auspices for, a reason that they've made these laws. And all these laws have to serve these stated goals. So the stated goals here, let's read it again. We, the people of these United States, in order to create a better nation, establish legality, ensure domestic peace, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the promise of freedom to ourselves and our descendants, do establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Pretty solid reasons. All good stuff. We're going to make some place that's better than the corrupt place we were before. Ironic at the moment. Establish legality. This document is the premier top-level legal document in the country. Everything else has to fall under its purview. Ensure domestic peace. We're going to make sure that things run well and that the nation is, peaceful and not a chaotic place of craziness. Provide for the common defense. People have to be able to defend themselves. A nation has to be able to defend itself from enemies. Makes sense. Promote the general welfare. Why would you have a government whose job is not to make sure things are generally getting better and doing well? Notice, okay. And secure the promise of freedom to ourselves and our descendants. Yeah, this is what we want. This was what the country was supposed to be, okay? Right here. So, let's keep trucking along. Now we go into the articles. Now, I know these are not going to be as fun, because you really want to jump into all of the amendments rather than the articles, because the amendments get into a lot more of the rights, but all of the articles establish the actual government part and how the government works. So we need to be very, very clear on that so everyone understands what our government is and is not allowed to do based on this document. So, Article 1, Section 1, and believe me, they started off, like I said, we're going to have to reorganize some of this later, but we're just, the first pass is just going through and rewording so that it is simple the first time, because they did not organize this in a way that makes any kind of sense, in my opinion. Article 1, Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Simple section there, not too bad. Establishes our two-bodied Congress, which we have. They haven't changed that yet on us. A big tin of water. But even then, we can absolutely improve and simplify what these phrases mean here. All legislative powers herein granted. Okay, nobody talks like that. That's not helpful for our current population to understand what's going on. So, let's go with instead all law. Oop, where did my red go? Why did my red stop? Come back, red. All, there we go. lawmaking powers, because that's what legislative powers are. I'm not used to talking this much, and I'm going to have to talk for hours and hours now. All lawmaking powers are granted to a Congress of the United States, which consists, it's still fine, of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Not too bad. Just kind of editing a little bit there, rewording a little bit to make sure that people understand the legislature is the basis of law in this country. The legislature is the thing that makes laws, okay? No other branch of government is allowed to make laws, okay? And I'm going to say that again. No other branch of government is allowed to make laws. Even in the first edit here, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. All lawmaking powers are granted to a Congress of the United States. It's only Congress that gets to make laws. Okay. Now, our judiciary, when we go further down here and get into the other sections and articles, have the ability to judge, as necessary for a judiciary, the constitutionality of laws. But to make them and to make what our laws are can only come from Congress. Seems like we've probably missed that point a lot over the years. I'm going to save it again. I'm always going to save. Never forget to save, everybody. I come from a generation of, like, if you missed that save and the power went out or something, you're screwed. You know, there's no auto save when I grew up. Absolutely not. So, let's read the next section. Section 2, Article 1, Section 2. So they started with the legislature being the first thing that they outlined, really. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. See what I mean? See, I can listen. I don't blame anybody for not reading through this. I don't blame anybody for getting exactly this far in and then giving up, because this is not acceptable today. This is absolutely not acceptable today. Let's fix this, okay? The House of Representatives is made up of members chosen every 2 years by the people of the several states. I'm still keeping several states because, as we know, that not every, as I said, they haven't organized this in a way that really makes sense. But as you get further in, or if you just understand that that's how our elections work, all of Congress does not get elected and traded out at once. It's staggered so that some elections in some places happen and some elections don't happen. Not everything is an election year for every single state all at once, because they didn't want to have entire groups of people in and out, because that would be pretty unstable, actually. It wasn't a bad idea to stagger the way elections work. But we really need to fix a lot of that. But again, all we're doing is trying to make it more simple language first. We're not changing the meaning of anything. And that's why I don't like the fact that we do have to keep and the electors in each state must have the necessary qualifications Does this have a spell check on it? It doesn't. See, I can just go blah, blah, and it's all wrong. Well, all right. That's what I get for using a simple program, but that's fine. We can fix all that kind of stuff later, too. That's not a problem. You know, if they're misspelling stuff, I'm misspelling stuff. Maybe it's an American tradition. All right, so the electors in each state must have the necessary qualifications for whichever branch of their state legislature, wait, hold on, legislature, right? My brain, yeah. I'm literally looking back at the other one that's right there to make sure I'm not crazy, because, you know, I do have a little bit of that neurodiversity, and reading and typing all at the same time is sometimes difficult, is larger. Okay, so let's go through that one again. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. So, because the nation started so small, they put, this is a like a check and balance kind of, I guess you could call it. Part of their, you know, ensuring things would work was the way that they had to organize it. So I said the electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. So your state legislature is going to have your House and Senate as well for each individual state, which again, that was not expressed so far. That did not get said anywhere. They did not organize it well, you know, from a top-down perspective of how everything's going to get organized. But if you're such a small, if the population of a state was so small that you only had one member of the House of Representatives, then you would have more senators than House members, which is definitely not true now, based on, you know, as we'll keep going in and seeing what the qualifications and the parameters for establishing, here it's right down here, representatives and direct taxes apportioned among the several states which include this union according to their respective numbers. Like, this is the area where they start to get into, like, how do we determine how many representatives each state has, and every, you know, and then we get to the next section with the Senate that establishes two. And okay, I jump ahead here, but it's because we need to explain it so you understand what this means, because it's not been explained yet in the actual document. So the House of Representatives is made up of members chosen every 2 years by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state must have the necessary qualifications for whichever branch of their state legislature is larger. So, to be an elector in that state, you have to be qualified to at least be in, you know, their state legislature in some way. Either now it's not. I'm also updating this to eliminate some of the future language, because, you know, as this was ratified and written, Congress had not yet met, because there wasn't a Congress, because they're establishing all of that right now. So there's a lot of future tense language in this document early on that we don't need the future tense of anymore. You know, we can look back and say, this is what it is now. So, not too bad, not too different. We got rid of requisite qualifications for the most numerous branch of state legislature. So, electors in each state must have necessary qualifications for whichever branch of their state legislature is larger. Easy to understand. It's always going to be the House now, in this case, because you're never going to have less than 2 people, really, as a House member for your entire state on the federal level. Save. And now here we go for qualifications. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained, listen to all the negative language here, no person not have attained double negative. This is where all of that legal nonsense comes from. When you go and you vote on, when your states are having their own elections and you have to vote for a statute that is happening within only your state, and they're like, this is the statute to avoid stopping the continuance of not doing the thing that we have already stopped, and you're like, just can stop it. Okay, we have to stop this stuff. It drives me nuts. I'm sorry that I keep harping on it, but this is quite literally one of the biggest problems standing in our way, is that our collective democracy and the general public don't understand what is constantly being read, and all of these 1,000-page bills and all that kind of nonsense that is directly affecting and negatively limiting our voice as a people. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state in which he shall be chosen. To be elected to the House of Representatives in Congress, because there's more because you have state houses of representatives, remember? We got to be specific. That's why this document might end up being a little bit longer, because we have to be simple but specific. The individual, because person, no person, the individual must be at least 25 years old. They must be a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years. They must live in the state for the position being elected by the time of the election. So, no person shall be, let's go. This is going to take some, I am trying to explain everything as I go, because I do want everyone to understand that I'm not changing any of the meanings here. But if you can't read the hard part, then you're not going to understand why the edited part means the same thing. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years. That's simple. We can parse that one. That one's not too bad for people. And been 7 years a citizen of the United States. Just backwards language that we don't need. And who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state in which we shall be chosen. Now this we need to take out the first two sections and just read from the top in order to really get that it's a double negative. No person shall be a representative who, and this is the who down here now, this who connects to this who, because who shall not, and that's the who shall not. No person shall be a representative who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state in which he shall be chosen. So, at the time of the election, you do have to be a resident of the state that you got elected for. You can't be elected to be a House member from California and then be currently living in Maryland, and you after that election you're like, oh, they elected me to California, and then you move to California. They put a cap on that right away to say you have to be a resident of the state you're being elected for. That's easy. That's easy to understand once you understand it. Now this one, boy howdy, this one. This is what I mean when I say that this document is a mess, because not all of this section of Article, what are we on? Section 2, Article 1 is valid anymore. But in the actual document, there's no notation showing you that. You have to go to the 14th Amendment to see how part of this paragraph was rephrased, but even in the 14th Amendment, it doesn't mention the fact that this is rephrasing this other. There's no referential documentation into itself within, our Constitution. That's a huge problem. So again, we're just going to, roll through it, write down what it means first, before we can get to the next parts where they change it. So let's read through this at least. Excuse me. Wow. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians, not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. End of sentence. So, you can see how there's a lot of problems there. The number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000. Talk about time to need an update for numbers. But each state shall have at least 1 representative. See, that was a check and that was they designed this document, sidebar, they designed this document in ways that they were assuming people would try to get around the legality of things. That's why they were trying to make it so specific and wordy, because they knew that, a nation founded by rebellion is going to try to rebel against its own laws too. So if you don't have, 30,000 people in a state somewhere at the time, you still get at least 1 representative there. It's like you're going to get at least 1. There's always going to be at least 1. There's further as we get in, you'll see that they make conditions for if nobody runs for office. If there happens to be a vacancy and just nobody runs. Can you imagine that today, where there's no one running for an office at all? Like, there's no senator from Connecticut right now, and nobody tried to take the seat. Just nobody. That's how rigorously bad these jobs were supposed to be, that the founders and drafters of this Constitution made specifically sure that there was a way to force people to be like, as we get into it, you'll see how, the executive branch and the governor of those states will be able to, call for an election or appoint someone to be in those positions. I forget exactly which one in that case, but we'll get there. It's just wild that they didn't consider, there's no amount of consideration given to what happens if these jobs become really lucrative and people fight for them all the time and they want to have these jobs for 40 and 50 years and they keep trying to be elected officials. There is no check and balance in this document for that kind of behavior that we see today, because these jobs were terrible compared to their private industry, normal jobs. Public service is supposed to be, you step away from your successful career for a while in order to be a public servant, and that's crappy, and it's a hard job, and you get paid very little, and then you leave when your term is up because, thank God you can leave, and go back to your successful actual business. That's the way it was designed, okay? If we want to talk about how things were designed in this Constitution. Let's see. So the number of representatives shall not exceed one for every 30,000, but each state shall have at least one representative, and until such enumeration shall be made, the state of, and then it lists what the initial house size was for these 13 states here. State of New Hampshire shall be entitled to choose with a U. Choose with a U. 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations 1, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 4, Pennsylvania 8, Delaware 1, Maryland 6, Virginia 10, North Carolina 5, South Carolina 5, and Georgia 3. So they either had enough numbers or they all agreed that this is what was roughly correct before they started doing a census. As you can see, this is really establishes the house based on population and the census, plus a lot of stuff that I added in there. And then obviously the green here, as I said up top, we've got to change that 30K base at some point. But right now we're just rewording, not changing. No changes, just rewordies. Let's see, so let's go through and do this. The number of, why do I keep doing that first? Representatives and the amount of direct taxes for each state in this union, well, let's keep union capitalized, is calculated by their numbers. These numbers are determined by adding all of the free people, including, and this is where some people are going to get tripped up, ones in servitude. Servitude. Is that how I spelled it? Yeah, I guess so. Temporarily. Okay, that's what bound to service for a term of years is. Because again, remember back then, you could be like an apprentice of something, but in order to do that, whatever you were apprenticing or whatever business you were trying to go in and get the skills of, they were going to have you. They were going to have you by the nuts for a certain number of time. Like, okay, you want to work for us and learn these trades? You are an indentured servant for us then for the next 5 years, and then you can have your freedom again. But we're going to work you like a slave until that point. So there is a differentiation here between that versus the 3/5 of all other people. So, including the ones in servitude temporarily, excluding indigenous peoples who are not taxed, and 3/5 of all slaves. Let's just call it what it was. The actual counting was made within 3 years after the very first meeting of the Congress of the United States. You have to be specific. And then every 10 years as instructed by law. All right, so that was figuring out the census. And the census is how we get all the numbers from everything, which is how we know how many House representatives every state is supposed to have, and the districts and all that good stuff. The number of Representatives is not to be over 1 per 30,000 people, but each state must have at least one representative regardless of population. Right? So that's what that means. And initially, before the first real count, each state had actually the following. So now we're going to do, you know what? I'm not bothering to type that because why would I? Let's change this here. Boom, 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 boom. Boom. Let's see. New Hampshire 3, Massachusetts 0, I suppose we do have to keep the Providence Plantations, since that was the name at the time. Initially, before the first real count, each state had the following. Yeah, so this is, again, we're not changing anything. Okay, good. So, next section. It's actually not the next section. This is the next section, section 3. We're almost done with section 2. Article 1, section 2. See, and we haven't even really had to go too far into the dictionary yet, but that's because this one I've kind of pre-done a little bit. Please also join me for study hall streams on Monday at the same time, 5 to 7 Eastern U.S. time. If you need to body double, or if you need, an excuse to get some work done for 2 hours and you need some background, probably have some kind of lo-fi study music kind of thing on with us while we just do some of our work together, as an excuse to keep streaming. When vacancies happen in the representation from any state, the executive authority thereof shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. See? So, when a vacancy is not the same thing as when an election is due, right? The vacancy is like somebody died, your representative died, they left, they quit, what have you there. So when the vacancies happen, the representation of any state, executive authority thereof, so the executive authority thereof a state, which is the governor, shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. So what we're really looking at is when a representative seat becomes empty in any state, the governor of that state will call for an election to fill that position or positions. Right? Because you could have more than one that's, dead or quitting. And you might have to have elections that are more than that. That's not too bad. That's easy to understand, right? When a representative seat becomes empty in any state, the governor of the state will call for an election to fill the position or positions. Easy. The House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment. Well, now this, I don't think I changed it all. House of Representatives. I think the only thing I changed was a little bit of the wording again. It's to keep it consistent so we're not just glossing it over here. Instead of shall choose, it's chooses. You know, I mean, it's not a lot of flowery language there, but again, it's the future tense that we don't actually need because this is how it's working and it's been working. House of Representatives chooses their speaker and other officers and shall have and has, see, and then she should change that to and has the sole power of impeachment. Little stuff on that one. That one's not too complicated. Not every part of this is crazily complicated, just the parts that they felt like making that way. Let's see what I did here. I messed up my notes a little bit, but that's on me. Just put it a little bit on the wrong page. I was like, that doesn't look like where I'm supposed to be right now. What did I write down? Okay. Section 3. This stream might only actually be an hour long today instead of 2 because this is about as far as I've gotten so far. We could go together. I mean, I don't mind going more and more, but I do want people involved in it is the thing. Right now it's just me doing this to a blank screen because nobody here. So doing more, maybe I'll stop. I think I'm going to stop after I get to the end of my first section of notes here. Or at least, let's see, how do we get... Let's get through section 3, because I almost got to the end of section 3. And then we'll save section 4 for next time. And that way I can put up the VOD of this and start promoting it a lot more, so that maybe next time we can get a bunch of people in here and we can start working on our revolutioning together. Alrighty, so section 3 now starts with the Senate. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. Again, that's not too complicated. That one's a pretty solid one right from the beginning. Just a little bit of language changes to make it easier. Senate of the United States has 2 senators from each state. I guess that's not a... You don't want to make a whole separate sentence unless they do. Kind of try to go with this roughly the same sentence structure because that is important. Chosen by their state legislature for 6-year terms semicolon. Let's keep the semicolon, just because that's more complicated than most people like. That's not part of the term that's too bad. You guys can get up to semicolon level, I'm sure. Each senator gets 1 vote in Congress. Simple. Now, immediately after they shall be assembled in consequence of the first election, they shall be divided as equally as may be into 3 classes. The seats of the senators of the first class shall be vacated at the expiration of the 2nd year, of the 2nd class at the expiration of the 4th year, and of the 3rd class at the expiration of the 6th year, so that 1/3 may be chosen every 2nd year, and if vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise, during the recess of the legislature of any state, the executive thereof may make temporary appointments until the next meeting of the legislature, which shall then fill such vacancies. So that's obviously not worded as good as it could be. Let's fix that. After the results of the first Senate election, senators were divided as equally as could be into 3 groups. The senators in the first group had their terms end at the end of 2 years. The second group had theirs end after the end of 4 years, and the third group had theirs end their term. Let's keep this consistent. Their term end at the end of 6 years. Let's go back here. Let's fix this a little bit. After the results of the first Senate election, senators were divided as equally as could be into 3 groups. The senators in the first group had their terms end at the end of 2 years. The second group had their terms, let's keep this the same. Their terms end after the end of 4 years, and the third group had their terms end at the end of 6 years. So that was also the easily rotating, this is why every 2 years a third of the country elects senators, because that's why it works. So let's see. Well, now, I'm almost at the end of my first section of notes, so we're going to ball it through together here. Section seems so that 1/3 may be chosen every 2nd year. So, still commas. So, every 2 years. Now, let's start with so that we can keep that. So that 1/3 of the Senate, make sure we're specific, remember? So that 1/3 of the Senate let's see, as the results of the Senate. Let's see, this is where we've got to because we're adjusting for future tense language versus what is then considered the thing that we've been doing, and we've been doing that the whole time because that's how it is, we do have to change a little bit in terms of the writing, I think, in order to both express that this was how it worked and how it continues to work, because they did not put that in here with that kind of, they were future tensing everything because they were writing it the first time. After the results of the first Senate election, senators were divided as equally as could be into 3 groups. The senators of the first group had their terms end at the end of 2 years. The second group had their terms end after the end of 4 years. Second group at the end of 2 years. Terms end after the end. Let's keep this consistent. After the end of 2 years. The second group had their terms end after the end of 4 years, and the third group had their terms end after the end of 6 years, so that 1/3 of the Senate gets elected every 2 years. So 1/3 may be chosen every second year. All right. Let's see. If vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise during the recess of the legislature of any state, the executive thereof may make temporary appointments until the next meeting of the legislature, which shall then fill such vacancies. So now we got to go back up to remember how they actually say the voting works here. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for the electors of the most numerous branch of state legislature. All right, so they're saying here, if vacancies, let's go start as we go. Vacancies is an okay word. Vacancies. Everyone stayed at a hotel. You know what vacancies are. If vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise, fair, during, now this is a specific term, during the recess of the legislature of any state. See, during the recess of the legislature of any state. So if vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise, while the state legislature is in recess, let's reword that a bit there. While the state legislature in question, see, how does that read? If vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise, while the state legislature in question, I don't know. Trying to do it as easily as we can, Vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise while the state legislature in question is in recess. That's okay. This is why I want more people involved. This is why I need whoever's watching this, if you're watching this, spread me around, okay? Make this a serious effort. I need people involved in this. We've got to do this together. Democracy is done together. I can't just be the crazy person out here rewording the Constitution for my own sake. Please spread me around. Resignation. Let's see. While the state legislature in question is in recess, the governor of that state may make temporary words, appointments until the next meeting till the next meeting of their state legislature, which can then permanently fill such vacancies. Let's see. How do we like that? While the state legislature... All right. Let's read again. If vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise, while the state legislature in question is in recess, the governor of that state may make temporary appointments until the next meeting of their state legislature, whom can then... I would say whom, but again, that's language we don't really use or need to use right now. Of their state legislature, which can then officially... let's change it permanently to officially. No, because it wouldn't be... It is still... let's see. Make temporary appointments on which last... Temporary appointments which last until the next... Okay, there we go. Which can... There we go. That sounds better. Let's see. Vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise while the state legislature in question is in recess. The governor of that state may make temporary appointments which last until the next meeting of their state legislature, which will then, not can, they don't have an option, they have to, which will then fill such vacancies. All right, let's read the official to make sure that we're still in line here. If vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise during the recess of the legislature of any state, the executive thereof may make temporary appointments until the next meeting of the legislature, which shall then fill such vacancies. I think we're on board. I think that's fine. Okay. Now let's see here. No person, here we have the same kind of idea as the House requirements, except this is the Senate requirements. No person shall be a senator who shall not have attained to the age of 30 years and been 9 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state for which he shall be chosen. Let's do it the same as before. To be elected to the Senate in Congress, an individual must be 30 years at least, remember, must be at least 30 years old, because if we did it, see, this is why I'm pedantic, and this is why I'm taking so long with this, because if it must be 30 years old, anyone could immediately make an argument that's like, well, to be elected to the Senate of Congress, an individual must be 30 years old. That's the only age you can be. You can't be 31, you can't be 29, you can't be anywhere else in between. You have to be 30 years old. That's why you must be at least 30 years old. Words are important, and I'm going to show everyone why. They must be a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years. And how did I word it up here with the other one? They must live in the state. That's right. We're just gonna say, should have done this from the jump here. Let's see. No person shall be a senator who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state for which he shall be chosen. They must live in the state for the position being elected by the time of the election. Done. Okay. The Vice President of the United States shall be President of the Senate, but shall have no vote unless they be equally divided. Another pretty simple one. I like the short ones are definitely the simple ones. It's when they start getting too crazy with the details. Laws are supposed to be written universally and simply so that the judiciary can do their job of determining, what has been broken legally or not. Okay, this level of over legality for pretty much everything, we're down to like noise complaints and like the sheer specificity of the kinds of laws we have here are part of the problem on a larger sense, but the big laws, the big ones all the way across the board, the federal constitutional laws, need to be written simply and universally, because then it works. Without that, it doesn't work. It'll be some sort of prejudice one way or another. So let's see. The vice, and notice, what's the vice president? They didn't mention a president or vice president in this document yet. They're just saying the Vice President of the United States. Who's that? And what's President of the Senate mean? They didn't define any of this stuff yet. Okay, so it's painful to have to just translate first, but there's a lot of work to do in order to fix what this actually means as a document. So the Vice President of the United States is also the President of the Senate, but does not get a vote except to break a tie. That's what we understand it to be. That's what it means. Get all the way through the... There's 4. Oh, there's 4. Okay. Yeah, you know what? That's good. Let's get through Article 1, Section 3 here, and then we'll start Section 4 next time. I've dropped my pen. I've got my pen. All right, now we might actually start getting into using the dictionary, because this is the end of where my notes is. So to get through these last few paragraphs, we might have to jump over and make sure we're using the right words. All right, let's see. Where did we stop off? All right. The Senate shall choose their other officers and also a president pro tempore in the absence of the vice president, or when he shall exercise the office of president of the United States. All right, So, also pretty easy. The Senate chooses their other officers. And also, I mean, we can't change the terminology they've decided to use so far. So a president pro tempore, when the vice president is absent, or when when the vice president becomes the president of the United States. So something happens to the president, vice president gets called up, moves up a notch. Then the Senate will choose their other officers. Also, a president, a temporary president, in the absence of the vice president, when they're not there and unable to preside over it, or when the vice president becomes the president because something happened to the president. So, also not too difficult there. Didn't have to jump to the dictionary yet. Let's see about these last two paragraphs. Perhaps we will. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. Okay, so now we're getting to it, because remember, the House has the sole power of impeachment. So the House can impeach, but the Senate will be able to legally try, as a court, try all impeachments. When sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. They shall be on oath or affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside. Okay, so again, what's the Chief Justice? They haven't set up what the Supreme Court is yet. They haven't told you any of this. This is completely unreferential to anything. It means nothing to you if you're reading this document in order. The President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. Right, so you got to have 2/3 to convict the president after an impeachment, right? That's what we're talking about. Let's see. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. Now, this is the part that's difficult for me, which is why I want more people to chime in and not do this myself, because I have degrees in political science and history, among one other one, but the computer information systems degree doesn't really help me that much in this case. So I know what they're talking about, but again, it's not very explicitly explained in the document. So, when we're talking about an impeachment, even back up further in the House, we're talking about impeaching the president. We're not talking about impeachments like, oh, we can impeach a bunch of anybody else, or, and they can impeach other members, but it's not explained here, or maybe because it's not explained, the idea that we understand that they could impeach other members is not true, because it doesn't say that, does it? It says to try all impeachments. Well, what's the impeachments? Heck, let's go over here. Let's try to use this. Let's see what the definition of impeachment is. Searching this document is actually a real pain. I've tried using the search function before, and it takes a long time to try to load up and search this PDF of a old dictionary, so it's actually much easier to do this first. Oh, J's. Oh, there's what? I? Let's see. And making it more immortal, immovable, immutable, impackable, impaint, impalatable, impassive, impeachment, impeachable, to impeach. All right. To hinder, to impede, to accuse by public authority, to bring into question, impeachable, accusable, chargeable, impeachment, hindrance, impediment, obstruction, public accusation, charge preferred, imputation, reproach. Okay, so I think in this case, when we're talking about constitutional impeachments, an impeachment, we're talking about that reproach, right? Because we know, at least as tradition so far, that you can be impeached, but not like arrested necessarily. You can impeached, but it's not necessarily guilty of a crime. This is simply the Congress impeaching you as a reproach. So we're not going to change that to reproach as a definition, but this is exactly why this 1828 dictionary is so very useful for what we're going to be doing. So now it says, when sitting for that purpose, unnecessarily capitalized, they shall be on oath or affirmation. Also, very vague language here. What do you mean by oath or affirmation? Let's look up. Let's see, I'm closer to O, so let's go down. O. Too far. Oop, way too far. Way too far, come on. Whoop. Oath, which is an affirmation. See, they've repeated things so many times in this document already. They ordain and establish. Those mean the same thing. You don't need both of those words. The conciseness of an English professor would have done wonders for these, farmers and military guys, and there were a handful of like legal experts and barristers, at the time, and I'm sure they were just banging their head on a wall while this was all happening. An affirmation, negation, or promise corroborated by the attestation of the divine being. Okay, so you have to be on. I think the on is what was throwing me off here. Be on oath or affirmation. So you have to be under oath. You have to specifically, like, you can't just walk in and be like, yeah, I think he did it. Like, no. You are going to swear legally, be under oath for this when you're impeaching someone. Let's look at affirmation too, just to make sure. Glad we got to use this in the first stream, actually, because this is a great, fun resource to me. I'm a nerd. What about it? Let's see. Affirmably, affiliation, affirmative, affirmation. The act of affirming or declaring the position affirmed, confirmation in law, the solemn declaration of a Quaker answering to an oath. Okay, that may be very specific to the time, but it is answering to an oath or an affirmation. So, Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. I think we can kind of keep that pretty much the same. Senate has, again, we got to change the tense here, has the sole power to legally try all. That seems a little redundant, but to try is not, we understand that in this legal sense because this is a legal document, but got to be specific. Got to be specific for everybody. Everybody has to understand this, okay? I do want 6th graders to be able to read this and be like, okay, I get it. That's important. Try all impeachments. when doing so, when sitting for that purpose, they must be under oath. When the President, specifically, of the United States is the one being tried, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which they did not specify here, but that's what this means, shall preside over the case. In order to be convicted, let's see, no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. In order to be convicted, 2/3 of the senators present. I think we can use present. Senators present must vote for said conviction. Right? So again, this is an example where we've got slightly longer, potentially, in order to be more clear. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. When sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. The Senate has the sole power to legally try all impeachments. When doing so, they must be under oath. When the President of the United States is the one being tried, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court shall preside over the case. In order to be convicted, 2/3 of the senators present must vote for said conviction. I feel like we're cooking here. I feel like we're doing it. All right, last paragraph for this stream. Let's see. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. We're going to have to look up all of that in order to make sure that we're using the same definitions that they were using then. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to the removal of office and disqualifications to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. Honor, trust, or profit. That just means you can't be a government official, basically. But, how we reword that to make it clear. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not exceed further. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to remove. So judgment in this case is referring to punishment. Punishment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to the removal of office. So if you get impeached, the legal punishment for being impeached is not beheading, for instance, right? Now, all it is you're being removed from office and you're being disqualified to hold and enjoy. See, they used so many unnecessary additions to their language here. Hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States, but the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. So separately, this is two separate issues here, then. The issue is the judgment in cases of impeachment shall not, you can only remove them from office and disqualify them from holding any other public office, is what this is saying. But if the party, the individual convicted, is still liable and subject to regular criminal law based on whatever it was they did. So you can be impeached, obviously, for all kinds of different unacceptable behavior, but if some of that unacceptable behavior was like, doing other incredibly illegal bad things, like murders and whatnot, you will still then be liable and subject to the indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment of the murder you did. Okay, this court can't, this specific Senate court and ability to impeach cannot convict you for those punishments and crimes, but the regular court can. And that's what this is saying. I used the SpongeBob font down here for my notes. I didn't even remember that. That's hilarious. I am happy that we finally had a font that expresses sarcasm appropriately. All right. Let's knock this out. Let's knock this out since this is the last piece here for today. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal of office. So, punishment in cases of impeachment will not punishment in cases of impeachment. How about instead of wording them negatively? So much in this is worded very negatively because they were worried about people doing too much stuff. Go figure, they were right about that one. That we need to, they wanted people to not, get away with things. So punishment in cases of impeachment is punishment in cases of impeachment in the case of impeachment. Let's change that. Punishment in the case of an impeachment is limited to removal from office and being disqualified to hold any other public office in the United States. Right? Judgments in cases of impeachment shall not exceed further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. I mean, they got specific there, but we don't need to be that specific. We can just say punishment in the case of an impeachment is limited to removal from the office and being disqualified to hold any other public office in the United States. But the party convicted is still liable and subject to further indictment, trial, judgment. We're going to use those. These are all words that we know how to use, so we can still use these. It was the honor, trust, or profit that I realized we don't really need to be specific in those cases for as they outlined it more specifically than we needed to. Let's see. Liable and subject to further indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. Let's see, can we make that more clear is the question. Let's see, but the party convicted is still liable and subject to further indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment is still liable and subject to further legal indictment? Further legal indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. Because it's not this particular legality. It would have to be then tried in another court and tried in another case, you know? Like, hey, you got removed from office because you killed somebody, and now that family is pressing charges for, you know, manslaughter or something. You know, so it's like the impeachment can only remove you and disqualify you, but the rest of the law you're under, it's still going to get you. Everybody paying attention to that part? That's a very, very pertinent part these days. An incredibly pertinent part, as a matter of fact. This part. Well, this was only about an hour and a half so far. Or a little bit more. But let's see, what do we have in section 4? A little preview. Should I keep going? I guess I could keep going if I wanted to. I want to stop this. I want to stop this so that I can clip this up a little bit, send it out more, try to build some following first, because I'm nobody. Keep in mind that I'm nobody, and I'm just doing this because I can't not do it anymore. You know, this is the breakdown of where we are as a society. This is, as this farce of a place crumbles, I want to help get everybody on the same page for what we have to rebuild, because I think really no matter what you believe or what side of things you're on, you understand that we're coming to a point where nothing that has been built can continue. You know, when we say it's all got to come down and we've got to rebuild all of it from scratch and try again, we mean all of it, okay? This is a really quite an interesting time we live in. Boy, don't you wish we didn't live in interesting times anymore, millennials? Oh well, turns out everything else in our life was just prepping us for this. So, lock in, because the revolution's just starting. Thank you. I hope you are watching here on the YouTube and hopefully Patreon and GoFundMe and anything else that I've put up. Spread me around so that I can continue to be a problem that is pedantic and accurate and correct for all of the people who keep trying to lie through their teeth about everything, so that we can all, you know, start afresh and be on the right page together as we protect our democracy and rebuild it from what it's become. My name's Ben. Sursum Corda.